Resident Evil, or Biohazard as known in Japan, was created by Shinji Mikami and Tokuro Fujiwara in 1996. Developed by Capcom, and as of 2019, the best-selling video game franchise under their belt, with over 95 million sold worldwide. With its tense atmosphere and tank controls, when the original saw release, many would become obsessed with the genre of games known as survival horror. While not the first of its kind, with many games like Human Entertainment's Clock Tower for the Super Famicom in 1995 coming before it, and games that inspired it from the likes of 1992's Alone in the Dark for the PC, developed by Games, and first being pitched as a sequel to the 1989 title Sweet Home for the family computer. It tells the story of 5 filmmakers exploring an old mansion, encountering many different supernatural enemies. Seriously, it has zombies, the door loading animations, with notes to read throughout as well, and similar puzzles. Nonetheless, Resident Evil would go on for many of us to be the one that we would remember as the introduction to this genre of games. But for many like myself, while they might have played the original title, many were probably still small children at the time of the release, so it was probably just too scary to attempt it. I watched my uncle play, and the image of the first zombie turning around slowly stained my brain that night, along with the music, and I had a hard time sleeping. I realize the graphics and overall cheesiness of the game now, and realize this is silly, but hey, I was just a kid. It wasn't until I saw an issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly advertising a GameCube remake of the title in December of 2001 that I would become obsessed with what I was seeing. The screenshot showed off the most realistic looking game I'd seen to date, and truly terrifying looking zombies to boot. And as a big fan of anything zombie at the time, I was hooked, and I couldn't contain my excitement and would start saving my school money right away, waiting for its release in North America on April 30th of 2002, in which it would take me over 3 weeks and many attempts to finally get my hands on the title, only to find out to my shock that later on it would go down as one of the worst selling Resident Evil titles. But not only that, but a big reason for the shift in the franchise after Resident Evil 4. But before I get into the legacy and overall scores across the board, let's dive into the main reason we're here. Why was this title remade in the first place? What is Resident Evil from a gameplay perspective, and what was the mindset behind the critically acclaimed best remake of any video game ever? Let's enter the nightmare of Resident Evil. Resident Evil Remake took over the course of 1 year and 2 months to develop, and much like the Capcom 4 deal I mentioned in the video link above, it was part of an exclusive deal between the company and Nintendo. Directed by Shinji Mikami again, this time deciding to produce a remake because he felt the original had not aged very well, and also that the GameCube's capabilities would be able to bring it closer to his original vision. Developed by Capcom Production Studio 4, which existed from the late 1990s to 2005, they was responsible for developing many of the Resident Evils of the time, minus the likes of Resident Evil 0, the Survivor series being done by Studio 3, and Outbreak by Studio 1. This deal would also see the re-release of the titles Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and Resident Evil Code Veronica as well, but none would receive the same overhaul treatment, as it wasn't felt they truly needed it at the time. Programmer Yashiro Ampo would be cited as saying the original game's poor localization was one reason for the remake, with Capcom's marketing director Todd Thorson saying that the ultimate goal was to achieve motion picture quality visuals and create even more suspense and fear than the original. Starting production early 2001 with a team of 4 programmers, being one of the first Capcom titles made for the Nintendo GameCube. This would lead the team into studying the system's performance during the early parts of development. At first, the team considered using environments with computer graphic animation, but it would quickly be realized that it would push the system capability too much to get that realistic graphics they were really after. This would lead to the graphical style of the remake using 3D models over pre-rendered backgrounds like past Resident Evil games before it. Regardless of this fact, upgrades on the camera for more dynamic angles that can sometimes track the player, and use particle effects for motion video or different shadow textures like zombies and trees outside are used at max in order to create more fear for players, as it was a major priority for the team. Most of the remake's backgrounds was made with the idea of having enemies appear out of nowhere, so a high contrast of light and dark was used in order to achieve this effect. The amazing atmospheric music you hear in this title was composed by Suzaku Uchima, best known for composing the music for Mega Man 8. Around 40% of the characters' animations were made from the ground up, with the other 60% consisting of captured data Capcom had gathered from auditioning actors to be used as references, with the protagonist being based on real-life models like my preteen crush Canadian model Julia Voth, who would be used for Jill Valentine's in-game design. She looked a lot like Sarah McKenzie from the show Jag that ran from January 3rd of 1997 to April 29th of 2005, being an earlier in-life crush I had, so I think you understand why I had my fair share of teenage dreams over it. After all, gotta get a bite of that sandwich, am I right, Barry?
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Really?
Developers at first would struggle to develop the system for the computer graphic animation. Nintendo would step in to provide assistance going on to solve the issues they were experiencing. Capcom rewrote the game's script to make the plot more convincing in a real-life setting, and also hired a new team of voice actors due to the overwhelming outcry of just how bad the original voice cast was. Originally only planning to upgrade the graphics and tweak the gameplay slightly, they realized as the game was getting closer and closer to launch that they wanted more and started adding new features. For instance, sub-items like Jill's stun gun. The developers wanted to make all enemies invisible, but due to it making it far too different than the original game, they decided against it, but instead put it as an unlockable bonus mode instead. Wanting the zombies to have a way to revive in time, the idea of Crimson Heads was introduced that I'll go into more detail about in a few minutes when we cover gameplay. Also, they would go on to add new areas for players to explore, such as an area just outside the mansion with a graveyard and a cabin. One major plot involves the cabin I just mentioned that introduces the character Lisa Trevor, a monster cut from the original game. This is my favorite Resident Evil monster of all, and I plan to make a video going over these events, so I'll have to wait for them to go into further details. If they ever do remake the remake, I'd like to see a Mr. X spin on this character. Another neat little Easter egg that was added near the end of the game in the laboratory, you can find when you reach the computer that requires you to enter a password. Proceeding to enter the password mole from the original game instead of the new password cell, you will then hear the tofu from the Resident Evil 2 non-canon side game on the computer screen. Note, this only works on easy mode. Mikami decided against using adjectives to describe difficulty levels, and instead would feature unique questions in their place. Final stages of development were intense, with some having to work 2 straight months with 0 days off in between in order to meet the deadline. Resident Evil Remake was finally released in March 2002 in Japan, and April the same year in North America, with Europe to follow in September. The story would center around STARS, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, as they investigated a series of bizarre murders that had occurred around the Arkley Mountains of Raccoon City. Once the contact with Bravo Team ceases, Alpha Team is sent in to investigate, and once finding Bravo Team's crashed helicopter, they are attacked by a pack of undead, hellhound-like dogs, killing member Joseph. Helicopter pilot Brad Vickers freaks at the sight and takes off, leaving the remaining members Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Albert Wesker, and Barry Burton behind, forcing them to flee into an abandoned mansion known as the Spencer Mansion. This is where they would be split up and the nightmare would begin. Immediately, players would be thrown into tense environments with the perfect moody music to fit each room and realistic for the time backgrounds that just help add to the tense nature of the series, going on to solve the mystery of the T-virus created by the Umbrella Corporation that caused the residents of the mansion and creatures within to turn into undead nightmare fuel. I would go on more about the story, but I'd like to go over some more of the events in greater detail at a later time, so I'll save what I have to say for then. I don't want to keep this video going on too long after all, and best save some major spoilers for a separate video. Players would control each character from a third-person perspective, exploring the Spencer Mansion, pushing objects to solve puzzles, picking up items that once in your inventory can be used, and some, once examined or combined, can be used to solve puzzles and be used for entering areas you once thought you couldn't enter. The inventory is limited to a small number of slots to make the item management more tense, with a few boxes spread throughout the mansion for use for extra storage. All boxes are connected, so once an item is placed into one, no matter what box you use, you'll have access to all your items. Depending on the character you choose, each will have his or her advantages or disadvantages. While being able to take and receive more hits than Jill, Jill has the ability to carry more items and unlock more doors using her lockpick than Chris. Defensive items vary between the two as well. These will save the player from receiving damage when grabbed by a zombie. These include the dagger for both and the stun gun for Jill, with Chris being able to place a stun grenade into a zombie's mouth, detonating it with a bullet. These can be found scattered throughout the mansion in limited supply. supply. Speaking of limited supply, that's the name of the game in this survival horror, emphasizing dodging by not providing much ammunition for the player, providing many different gun types throughout the story, with some being skippable if you're not aware of how to get them, and due to the limit on ammo, you'll find yourself holding on to these for major fights more often than not, kinda like how players treated power-ups on Mega Man X, but much more stressful and limited. Definitely a Capcom title. In order to regain health, herbs would be needed, being that of green, blue, and red, that can be combined to increase their effectiveness. Green would be your basic healing herb. Red, while useless on its own, can be combined with green to make it much more powerful, and blue being able to heal you from various poisons caused by things such as spiders, snakes, and plants throughout the game, and once infected, slowly drain the player's health. One new to the remake type of zombie that kept me up all night upon first seeing it is known as Crimson Heads. They are born from non-decapitated zombies that are left unburned from fuel that you'll find within the mansion's many save rooms. If left untouched for too long, they will reanimate, but instead of slowly walking, they will run at you, now equipped with claws made perfectly for ripping into your flesh. This, along with previously mentioned Lisa Trevor, would go down as two of my favorite inclusions on the remake. I guess they just left a mark on my psyche. Saving isn't something you can just have access to as well, as yet another way to increase the atmosphere of the game. Typewriters are used along with ink ribbons normally found nearby, using up one of your ink ribbons on each save, making you manage how many times you take advantage of this feature. While featuring an auto map to help navigate, there is also side maps that can reveal hidden rooms and areas. One of the best parts about Resident Evil is how the story is slightly altered depending on who you pick, and even some of the choices you make throughout the title can impact the story in major ways, including the ending. If you finish the game within a certain time limit and difficulty, it will unlock secret costumes accessible within a closet after starting a new file. Bonus weapons such as a infinite ammo rocket launcher, and special modes like Real Survivor, which is unlocked after completing normal on the once again playthrough. In this mode, the item boxes are not linked and auto aim is turned off. One dangerous zombie. This is unlocked after you complete the game with both Jill and Chris on normal. In this mode, STARS member Forrest comes back as a zombie with a fuck ton of grenades strapped to him. You cannot shoot him without setting them off. If you do, the explosion will engulf you and the entire Spencer mansion. Thankfully, once all the death masks are acquired and used, Forrest will no longer appear. Also, last but not least, the previously mentioned invisible enemy, unlocked when beating Real Survivor mode, using the idea of invisible enemies brought up during the development. Beating invisible mode within 5 hours will open up a message from the director and a slideshow of unused costume designs. Upon release, Resident Evil was received with open arms, getting mostly praise for its graphics and general all-around improved gameplay over the original. Many of the new inclusions were so good, in fact, when going back and playing the original, it's hard to believe how much wasn't there that was part of the remake. Unfortunately, until the 2015 HD remaster version of the title, the game wouldn't get the sales it deserved, becoming PlayStation Network's biggest launch game and Capcom's fastest-selling digital game across North America and Europe, exceeding sales of 1 million copies by April of 2015, and as of September 2019, the remaster has sold up to 2.4 million copies worldwide across all available platforms. I'm sad this took so many years to happen, but given the limited owner of GameCubes back then, it really couldn't be helped, and at least the error has been fixed now. Resident Evil sits on Metacritic at a score of 91, with other places like GameSpot giving it a score of 8.9 and IGN at 9. It was also ported to the Wii in December of 2008, but wasn't praised by all at the time due to mostly having not the best controls and the lack of widescreen support. With the recent release of Resident Evil 3 Remake, last year's Resident Evil 2 Remake, and the rumors going around for a 4 Remake, it doesn't seem like this will be stopping anytime soon. While Resident Evil 3's remake didn't quite live up to many longtime fans' hopes due to cutting content, and with Resident Evil 2's remake being almost perfect to many for its new Mr. X mechanics and all-around tense atmosphere, so far neither have captured the same vibe the original remake managed so well. No cut corners, all new content, and just an all-around upgrade that only improved the original overall. It paved the way for all remakes and how they should be treated, and I can only hope this much love goes into the upcoming remake of Resident Evil 4, aimed for release in 2022. Hey everyone, just wanted to take a moment and kind of thank all the new subscribers for coming in and all the new likes. I really appreciate it. The fact that you guys take your time to watch my videos means a lot to me, and I just really wanted to take the time to thank you. There's a few of you out there that have really taken the time to support me, and it really means a lot. Trust me, more than you know. Your words, some of them have just really blown me away. You guys know who you are. Just thank you. With that, guys, this has been Weekend Moblin saying, stay tuned. Till next time.